This story is brought to you by the Month of Lerv.
The Month of Lerv.
Part 5 and Epilogue. I still say it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, said Pokey as they wandered out of Carousel Boutique. It's never going to work. And what did Pinky mean by flopping ears?
Just make sure you don't do anything official, Barry, said Carrot Top. I know where you live.
Barry stood on her rear hooves and made a cross over her belly.
Cross my heart and hope to fly. That's your liver. I trust it more than my heart, said Barry. Speaking of livers, which one of you is taking Lyra out on the town tonight? Carrot Top and Pokey looked at each other for a moment before turning back to Barry. You can't seriously be suggesting a bachelorette party, said Pokey. That's just inviting disaster. I just want to go a day without being punched by mares, attacked by raccoons, or Luna knows what else. Pokey turned to walk away, with his head held high in a haughty huff. I will be a slapstick punchline no longer. Pokey turned and immediately fell into a ditch with a burst of profanity that rattled nearby windows. Pushing himself to his hooves, he looked up to see Berry Punch and Carrot Top barely containing their laughter. With all the dignity a muddy pony could muster, Pokey climbed from the ditch and walked away in silence. So, seriously, said Barry, wiping away tears, I'll take Lyra out if you'll take Bonbon. I doubt they would ever want to go out, said Carrot Top. Lyra said something about locking themselves in their house until the wedding tomorrow, and I'm inclined to agree with them. You sure? Said Barry with a waggle of her eyebrows. I know a great country club. Lots of tall, handsome stallions, all the music and sweat from days on the farm. What does that have to do with Lyra and Bonbon? Carrot Top asked. They're getting married, to each other. Barry stared blankly at Carrot Top. They're both mares? I'm not following your point. Pokey was right, said Carrot Top with a sigh. This plan is insane, and everyone involved is too. Maybe you're right, I could use a drink after all. Now you're speaking my language, said Barry. I'm sure your mother won't mind looking after the girls for another hour or two. Let's go get tanked. See, it's things like this that run you into problems with the law, Carrot Top sighed. One glass, then we go home. Agreed, said Barry. Let's go to the Amber Rose. They have really big glasses. The twang of a fiddle and steel guitar floated on the evening breeze, inviting ponies into the barn-turned nightclub. The doors hung open, letting through a gentle breeze to cool the warm summer night over the packed crowd of ponies. Inside the club, Hot sat hunched over a bar stool, nursing a cocktail on the rocks, while a terrible band sang in the corner. Sitting next to him was the gray newsmare, Snappy Scoops, in her trademark hat. She put an arm around him and gave him a friendly shake. "What are you so bummed about, Hot?" asked Snappy. "You stopped that sham of a marriage, and you made a boatload of cash for it. It's a good thing we're here to—" "It was not good at all," snapped Hot, throwing her arm off his shoulder. "And how dare you publish my speculations as fact? You brought shame and disgrace to the private matters of a noble family with your salacious stories. I'm sorry I even asked for your help." "Ah, get over it," said Snappy. "We both got what we wanted." "This isn't what I wanted at all," wailed Hot. "You got a headline and a scandal. You got your precious inches in the paper at the expense of a noble's dignity. I just wanted Lyra to stop carousing with Pokey and stay loyal to her mare." "Scandals sell," said Snappy. "And it's not like you turned down that check from Duke Aferio." "Don't remind me," groaned Hot, slumping back to his drink. "Hopefully he'll put in a good word with one of the noble houses, because Pokey's going to fire me when he finds out what I've done." "And what have you done?" asked Barry. Snappy and Hot spun on their stools to find Barry and Carrot Top standing behind them, with murder in their eyes. Barry set down a wineglass the size of a fishbowl and cracked her hooves. "Well, hello, ladies," said Snappy, pushing her hat from her eyes. "You're looking radiant this evening. Can I buy you a drink? Or a bottle? Please don't kill me." "Not the face," begged Hot, cowering behind his hooves. "Why in the name of Celestia would Barry hit you?" asked Carrot Top. "You didn't do anything. You, on the other hand," she said, pointing a hoof at Snappy. "I'm glad Pinky hasn't found you yet, because that means I get first crack at you." "Hey now," said Snappy, putting up her hooves defensively. Hot's just as guilty as I am. He's the one who tipped me off to Pokey and Lyra's sordid affair. I just took the pictures and published the story." "You did what?" Barry shrieked. "You little fink!" She downed the rest of her drink in a single massive gulp and let loose a bar-rattling belch. "Have at you!" "Are you challenging me to a duel?" asked Hot, lowering his hooves. "I refuse to strike a mare, and furthermore—" Hot was rudely interrupted by a hoof to the jaw that sent him sprawling across the bar. He slammed into another patron, spilling his drink over another pony, who retaliated with a hoof of his own. The club exploded in a frenzy of hoof fights and swearing as the fight spread like wildfire from the bar to the surrounding tables. Carrot Top didn't even have time to take a swing at Snappy before she ducked under a table and scurried towards the door. As the bar exploded into chaos, Barry wove through the crowd with the focus of a master, throwing kicks and chops that laid flat any pony that dared to come near her. Carrot Top ducked under thrown bottles and bar stools before retaliating with her own style of farm brawling. With the bar engaged in full melee, no one saw Pinkie Pie following Snappy out of the club. It only took a few minutes for the police to arrive at the scene and Barry and Carrot Top standing back to back, surrounded by a pile of pulverized ponies. Rather than running, they stood to revel in their victory, and then found themselves forced to the ground by the magic of Ponyville's police unicorns. Carrot Top and Barry struggled against the blanket of magic until cuffs were clamped across their fetlocks. "I want a lawyer!" shouted Barry. "Me too!" shouted Carrot Top. "My brother's a judge!" Barry protested as the unicorns dragged them towards the wagon. "I thought you only had a little sister," Carrot Top asked. "Well, they don't know that," said Barry. "I mean, they do now, but—"
"You have the right to remain silent,"
said the officer, levitating Barry and Carrot into the wagon.
"I suggest you exercise that right. It's bad enough that you're our most frequent customer, now you're dragging Carrot Top into your lifestyle."
"I regret nothing!" Barry shouted as the wagon door slammed shut. A door pounded in Pokey's dream long enough to convince him that someone was actually pounding on his door. The light of dawn poured in through the window, and the impatient pounding continued. Pokey rolled from his bed and toward the door in a half-asleep stumble that closely resembled the walking dead than a conscious pony. Behind the door was the wall-eyed face of Derpy. "I brought you a letter," she said with a smile. "There's postage due, though." Pokey floated a few bits off his nightstand and into Derpy's waiting hooves. She responded by sticking the note to his horn and fluttering off in the early morning sunrise. Pokey wandered back to the siren call of his bed, only to catch a glimpse of the note in his mirror. The writing was near illegible, and the reflection didn't aid comprehension at all.
"I can't read this," said Pokey to no pony in particular. "Who would send me a backwards letter?" He looked up again at his horn, then pulled the note off with an exasperated sigh. There wasn't enough sleep in the world to deal with this sort of aggravation. "Come bail us out of jail. Love, Carrot Top, and Berry Punch." Someone once told Pokey that laughter was the best medicine. Whether or not this was true was up for debate, but as his giggling slowly transformed into cackles of madness, the tiny piece of Pokey that was still clinging to reality found the idea a bit hard to believe. A pounding on the wall, followed by his neighbor's cries of frustration, snapped him from his hysterics. Grabbing his sack of bail money, Pokey trotted through the streets of Ponyville on a simple mission: get every pony to the church on time. It seemed like a simple task. Every pony shows up at one place around the same time. So why couldn't a bunch of adults do a simple thing like not get arrested? How hard was it to obey the law? Pokey mulled over the thoughts as he found his way to the basement of City Hall. The basement holding cells sparkled in the early morning sun as Carrot Top and Berry Punch scrubbed the floors under the watchful eye of Officer Magnum. The clatter of a door chime caught his attention, and he walked behind his desk. Pokey trotted down the stairs a moment later. "I'm here for Berry and Carrot Top," said Pokey. "Well, that's enough community service for these two," said the officer. "I hope they learned their lesson not to start fights." "I'm sure they have," said Pokey, dropping the sack of bits on the desk. "I'll take these two home. Got a wedding to get to in a few hours." "Oh, I'm afraid Miss Punch won't be attending that," said the police pony. "Mr. Cuisine is dead set on pressing charges, so she gotta stay in lockup a few more days." "You've gotta be kidding me," said Pokey. "Barry's the minister. We literally cannot perform this wedding without her." "Well, then you'll have to talk to Mr. Cuisine and see if he'll drop the charges," said Magnum. "He's at the clinic."
In an instant, Pokey was out the door and running through the streets of Ponyville in a panicked gallop. Hopefully, Pokey could get him to see reason without threatening his job or his life, but given his luck recently, that didn't seem likely. Pokey burst through the clinic doors, startling Nurse Redheart out of her chair. Redheart popped up from behind the desk with a scowl as she straightened her hair. "What in the name of Celestia is wrong with you bursting in here like that?" she demanded.
"Sorry, dear," said Pokey. "Where's Hot?"
"The Pony Privacy Act prevents me from—"
"I'll pay his bill if you tell me where he is,"
said Pokey. "Equestria pays for every pony's medical care," said Redheart.
"I'll give you 10 bits. Where is he?"
Dentist office," said Redheart, pointing a hoof. "Dr. Colgate should be done putting his teeth back in by now." Pokey trotted down the hall until he came at last to an open door. A blue unicorn was busy washing her hooves while Hot stood from the dentist's chair. A nasty hoof-shaped bruise graced his cheek. Pokey approached, smiling with all the saccharine sincerity he could muster.
"Hot, my good pony," said Pokey. "I heard about your run-in with Barry last night. Terrible thing, really. Say, when was the last time you got a raise?"
"I'm not dropping the charges," said Hot. "And I quit. I refuse to work for you, you philandering whelp. Why, if I hadn't just gotten my teeth repaired, I'd challenge you to a duel for Bonbon's honor." Pokey blinked in confusion as he tried to understand what the heck Hot was trying to say. He pointed a hoof at Hot to accuse him of something, but no words came to mind. He instead stood there for a moment before shaking his head.
"What in the name of Luna are you talking about?" asked Pokey.
"Don't act like you don't know," snarled Hot. "You and Lyra, carrying on in the kitchen like that? She is a noble, sir, and how dare you get between her and Bonbon? Were I a few years younger, I'd give you a sound thrashing you'd never forget." "Hey!" Colgate scolded. "Take your lover's quarrel outside. I don't need you two breaking my equipment."
"Sorry, Dr. Colgate," said Pokey. Pokey grabbed Hot and dragged him into the hallway. "Hot, are you out of your bucking mind?" asked Pokey. "What would give you the idea that Lyra and I were an item?" "You couldn't keep your hooves off her when she came in from the rain the other day," said Hot. "I've seen how you look at her. It's the same look you give all the mares you're interested in. Miss Pie, Miss Daisy, Miss "Think real hard before finishing that sentence," Pokey snapped. "Lyra's my friend. She's been my friend for a long time, and the only thing I want for her is to get married to Bonbon. Today, at the time she put on all her invitations. I may be dedicated to lost causes, but do you really think I would have been driving myself up a wall for the past few months if I didn't want them to get married?"
"Mr. Cuisine," said Dr. Colgate, popping out from the office. "I have instructions once you're done fighting. Don't get punched in the mouth." "Thank you, Doctor," replied Hot. He turned back to Pokey and jabbed him in the chest with a hoof. "Look, I'll drop the charges so the wedding can commence, but if I see you anywhere near Lyra, I will have their marriage annulled so fast it will make your head spin."
"What kind of threat is that?" asked Pokey. "You're not a judge or a noble."
"You're a real dunce, Pokey," Hot huffed. "Of course I'm not, but I know plenty of ponies who are. Who do you think has been sending information to Duke Aferio?" Pokey stood dumbfounded a moment, trying to piece together what Hot had just told him.
"You did what?" he asked. "You're the leak? He stammered for a moment more as Hot walked back into the dentist's office. "I never cared that Bonbon isn't a noble," said Hot. "I just didn't want her to get hurt because of you." Pokey clenched his teeth so hard that cracking echoed through the hall. Were it possible for a unicorn's head to catch fire, Pokey would have become a wailing pyre of hate in that moment. Instead of becoming a harbinger of destruction, Pokey only turned and walked out of the building as if he were a marionette. When he got outside, he walked toward the Everfree Forest, where he could adequately express his feelings on the matter. 10 minutes later, the loudest and longest string of swearing ever heard in Ponyville echoed from the woods and into town like some sort of profane church bell of hatred. Because of the reams of paperwork involved, it was almost noon before Carrot Top and Berry Punch were released from the Ponyville Police Department. Pokey had long since gone off to prepare food for the reception, while the other ponies waited in awkward conversation for the Mayor of Honor and Minister to arrive. Octavia's ensemble played a few pieces as the minutes until the wedding ticked by with no sign of the two. A gathering crowd of 100 ponies turned to face the opening doors as the two mayors burst into the chapel.
From the sea of faces came a few whispered murmurs of relief as the two walked towards the front of the chapel. A pair of fillies trotted up to them as soon as they walked around the pews. "Mom," said the pink unicorn filly, "you're late. Every pony's been looking for you. Where have you been?" "Mommy had to spend the night with Uncle Magnum," said Barry. "Another night in the drunk tank, Mom?" sighed Ruby Pinch. "And you dragged Miss Carrot Top along too?" "Hey, it was a bar fight and we won," said Carrot Top. "Are you and Noi ready to be flower girls?" "Ready," said the yellow filly. "Mom's really mad at you, by the way." "She'll get over it," said Carrot Top. "All right, you two go get your flowers, and we'll see you in a bit." Barry and Carrot Top trotted away from the fillies and through the aisles of waiting ponies. Despite the efforts of the nobles, it seemed like every pony in town was here. Doctors, lawyers, bakers, and farmers all stood shoulder to shoulder with smiles as they waited for the happy couple to walk the aisle. Carrot Top and Barry ducked into the back room of the chapel where Rarity stood waiting for them. She dropped her tape measure on the desk and stamped a hoof. "Where have you been?" Rarity demanded. "The girls have been waiting forever for you." "Minor problem with getting arrested," said Barry, digging through the desk for her collar. "What do you mean, arrested?" asked Rarity. Why... "Don't worry," said Barry. She pushed back her mane to snap on the clergy collar. "We're good to go." "All this aggravation and lunacy will all be worth it if the day just goes as planned," said Carrot Top as she pulled on her dress. "Let's do this thing." "Well, I do hope it all goes as planned," said Rarity. "Speaking of which, have either of you seen Pinkie Pie? I haven't talked to her since yesterday." "I haven't either," said Barry. "I'm sure she's doing last-minute preparations. Don't worry about her. If every pony is ready, I'll go strike up the band." Barry walked up the stairs and into the chapel, where the noon sun illuminated the faces of the ponies gathered to see Lyra and Bon Bon joined at last. Barry nodded to Octavia, and the ensemble of ponies filled the chapel with the sound of music. The soft and dulcet tones of the piano and cello mingled in the air above the crowd as the two fillies started their slow procession up the aisle. As they laid a sea of rose petals at the hooves of the unicorns behind them, every eye turned to stare in amazement at the veiled bride. The dress was nothing short of spectacular. Gossamer laces trimmed in beadwork covered her from head to tail in the purest of white, finishing in hooped ruffles that fell along her legs in a cascade of lace. Only a teal horn and striped mane hung above the thick veil. But, as beautiful as she was, the crowd could only gasp as the second bride entered the church. She too concealed her face behind a thick veil, though all eyes were on her dress. The dress fell in pools of satin around her hips and flanks and covered her legs to the ground. She floated through the aisle of rose petals to the altar, her indigo and pink locks bouncing with each step. The two brides stood quietly for a moment before turning at last to Barry Punch. "Friends, family, visitors from all of Equestria," she began. "Today we join these two souls together in the unbreakable bonds of matrimony. To those who oppose this marriage, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." "I object!" A murmur ran through the crowd as every face turned to the blue earth pony at the rear of the chapel. There stood Duke Aferio, mane blazing orange in the sun, flanked on both sides by his personal guards. "I cannot permit this sham of a marriage to go forth," he said. "I will not stand by as a noble throws her life away to some commoner. By the power granted to me by Princess Celestia herself, I forbid this marriage to take place." Lyra's father charged into the aisle only to be blocked by the Duke's bodyguards. "You gelding!" yelled Stardream. He reached between the guards trying to wrap his hooves around Aferio's neck. "How dare you ruin my daughter's wedding! I should have known you were behind this, you rotten coward!" "You forget yourself, as your daughter does," snapped Duke Aferio. "I am your duke, and you are but a baron. I have the authority to cancel this marriage here and now, and I shall do so." "Well, there's nothing I can do about that," chimed in Barry. "Sorry, kids, looks like you ain't getting married at all." "What?" demanded Strawberry Lime. "After all this hard work? After everything, you're not just going to marry them?" "Isn't that what the Duke said?" asked Barry. "Sorry, rules are rules. I will not marry these two, and Celestia help anyone who does." "Just like that?" asked Duke Aferio. "I'm not going to have you jailed or anything?" "Bud, this is my job," said Barry. "I'm not going to lose it over these two." "Oh, well." The Duke paused, clearly at a loss for words. "Well, that was easier than I thought it would be. Ponyville will continue to reap the benefits of the nobles, I suppose. Guards, with me." The chapel erupted in outrage as the Duke marched out the door. Barry stood at the altar, quietly waiting for the mob to allow the Duke out. As the door slammed behind the Duke, the 2 guards breathed a sigh of relief.
"Well, that wasn't so bad," said the Unicorn Guard, walking away from the chapel. The 3 trotted away from the chapel as the sounds of 100 angry ponies followed them.
"I was expecting a riot," said the Pegasus Guard, looking back. "May I suggest we leave town while we can?" "Well," said Duke Aferio, "it's good that the subjects know their place. Still, it seems too easy. Perhaps we should go back in and clarify things." "Hi, Mr. Duke," chirped a voice from behind the trio. They slowly turned around to see the grinning face of Pinkie Pie. "Do you like cupcakes?" Duke Aferio wasn't a pony who knew fear. He had served with distinction in the equestrian military for years, facing down natural disasters and threats of beasts for years before taking his rightful place as Duke of the Everfree Province. Nothing he had ever encountered scared him as much as that pink pony patiently pacing along the cold stone floor. They were in some kind of cellar or basement devoid of windows with only a single stark light bulb casting light on Pinkie Pie. "You're a big bully, buddy," said Pinkie as her hoof falls echoed along the stone floor. "Paying ponies to be prickly, having hot and hot water, shanghaiing Snappy Scoop's stories? You're a mean pony, Mr. Duke."
"Who are you?"
demanded Duke Aferio with as much courage as he could muster. "I demand that you release me." "Oh, silly, I'm Pinkie Pie, and I threw this party just for you." She gestured to the wonderland of shadow decorations behind her. Balloons and streamers decorated the cellar in waves of purple and trails of glitter tracked behind an ominous wooden door. Low thumping like the kick of some industrial machine filtered from underneath it. "What is behind that door?" asked the Duke. "It's just for you," said Pinkie with a grin. Her mane hung flat across her face, like a fuchsia mask. "You hit your head on the way down here, so I waited for you to wake up just so I could show you. It's too bad you weren't nicer. There's a much bigger party going on later. I guess this one'll have to do." Pinkie picked up a large knife from the table and walked towards the Duke. He skittered backwards, pinning himself against the door. Pinkie kept walking towards him with her 1,000-watt smile, and his hooves fumbled with the door handle. "Yes, let's join your other friends," said Pinkie. "They're just behind this door. All the other mean ponies in Ponyville who tried to ruin this wedding are there, too. Mr. Hot, Snappy Scoops, and your guards. Some of the meanie nobles, too," said Pinkie. The door finally snapped open, and the Duke spilled into the room beyond. Pinkie stepped through the doorway, knife held high above the Duke. "Because you know what we do to mean ponies?" asked Pinkie. "No, Celestia, help!" he cried, throwing his hooves over his face. "Please!" "We throw them." She brought the knife down into an ornate cake. "A party!" Duke Aferio looked from between his fetlocks to see a glittery room filled with nobles enjoying thumping music and a wide variety of desserts. The 2 guards danced along with the music as Pinkie passed out cake to the guests. Duke Aferio sat stunned for a moment as Snappy and Hot approached. "Hey, Duke," said Snappy. "Glad you could join us. Have some cake." "But... what?" "Yeah, Pinkie's parties are really the best," said Snappy. "But... I wouldn't worry about it," said Hot. "Miss Pinkie is throwing a private party for the nobles. It appears she thought the nobility was jealous for not getting an invite." "That's not what this is about at all," said Duke Aferio. "It's about tradition and bloodlines. It's dignity." "I forgot your party hat," said Pinkie, snapping a paper cone onto his head. "Have some pie." Duke Aferio hung his head in defeat and took the slice of pie. The crowd had simmered into a dull mumbling of outrage as the 2 brides stood at the altar. Barry flipped her notes back to the beginning and stretched out her hooves in a yawn. "Well, sorry I didn't marry you 2, said Barry.
"I'm not," said Pokey, taking off the veil. His horn and mane had been powdered a light teal. "Sorry, Carrot Top, you're not really my type." Carrot Top took off her veil as well and shook out her dyed mane.
"Pity," said Carrot Top. "This is such a wonderful dress. Now let's get this wedding started for real." Pokey and Carrot Top stood to the side and turned to the back of the chapel. The band looked to each other with a shrug before starting from the top. The soft tones of cello and piano were accompanied by the procession of spring flowers from the 2 flower fillies as they waltzed up the aisle. Following behind them was Lyra, dolled up in a white linen toga. Across her neck was a gold band adorned with a small wrapped candy, a perfect depiction of Bonbon's cutie mark. The golden shoes that adorned her hooves accented the white linen of her dress as it trailed behind her. The guests could only stare as she walked down the aisle, mane pulled back in a golden beret of a leer. As Lyra arrived at the altar, she bowed to Pokey, still in the dress. Pokey bowed back and turned to watch as Bonbon entered the chapel. A great bustle of pink and indigo trailed over her shoulders and into a flowing train behind her as she trailed towards the altar. Gracing her ear was small earrings in the shape of a lyre. She paused at the altar to marvel at what her friends had accomplished, and tears of joy began to gather in the corners of her eyes as she turned back to Berry Punch. "See before you the joy in the hearts of those who will not be defeated by the world," said Berry. "Through the times and trials of the past few months, Lyra and Bonbon have endured what no pony should be expected to suffer through. Hate, jealousy, dishonesty from the world around them have shaken them, but their love has remained firm. Let the light of that love be a blessing to you all." Berry took a step back to let her words linger in the crowd. The quiet reflection of the moment almost brought a tear to her eye. There would be plenty of time for happiness later. Right now, there was only the wedding. "The brides have prepared their own vows," said Berry at last. Bonbon nodded and cleared her throat. "I knew from the first day that I met you that you were the one for me," said Bonbon. "All those years ago when we were just silly fillies playing without a care in the world along the streets of Ponyville, I couldn't help but think about how much I wanted to be your friend forever. I remember our first kiss, when we were just little girls. We didn't think it meant anything, and you moved away soon after. I knew I'd never forget you, but I often wondered if you would remember me. Years later, you came back to Ponyville. Whether you were looking for me, or work, or something else, you came back and you found me." She wiped away a tear. "I thought that you wouldn't remember me, but you gave me that same kiss when I saw you again. It wasn't the innocent kiss of a filly this time. It was a reminder that you and I were meant for each other. It was a kiss that brought me back to you forever. You said the other day that we hadn't made our vows yet, but I knew from the beginning I would love you forever, in sickness and in health, for rich or for poor. Till this world ends and the end of the next, I will love you forever, and I will always be by your side." The crowd applauded with the stomping of hooves as the two mares stared longingly at each other. As the sound of 100 pairs of hooves dwindled to silence, Lyra's lyre floated to her waiting hooves. The strings of the instrument filled the chapel with a haunting tune as Lyra's voice carried over the crowd of ponies. "I once had a dream that I had everything in the world that I could ever want. Money, fame, power, a castle in the sky. But when I searched my castle and found that you weren't in it, I realized it wasn't a dream but a nightmare instead. That's what life is without you. A never-ending nightmare. Part of me wants nothing more than to take you away from here, to live in the quiet luxury of a noble, so that nothing can ever come between us again. But if the past few months have taught me anything, it's that love is like music. Neither can be seen, but they can both be felt. They follow you no matter where you go, and the melodies can't be broken, no matter how hard you try. It's hard work to get it perfect, but when you get it right, it brightens the world around everyone it touches. Even if I were to never play another note, the music of you will always lead right back home." The soft music faded as Lyra set down her instrument. "You are my music, Bonbon." The crowd behind sat in silence as Berry stepped up to the altar. "Lyra Heartstrings, do you take Bonbon to be your wife?" "I do." "Bonbon, do you take Lyra to be your wife?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by Equestria, I now pronounce you wife and wife. What our goddess has put together, let no pony tear asunder." She smiled at the couple. "You may kiss the bride." Lyra stood on her back hooves and swept Bonbon into her arms. The crowd behind them erupted into applause as Lyra and Bonbon shared their first kiss as a married couple. Through the noise and cheering, everything faded around the couple. Even surrounded by family and friends, the two mares were alone together in that moment. Whatever hardships and nightmares they had endured were over now, and they started a brand new life as one. Lyra broke the kiss only for a moment to whisper to Bonbon, "And they lived happily ever after. True to their promises to each other, Lyra and Bon Bon did live happily ever after. They both realized that marriage and love were hard work with tremendous rewards. Things may not have always been perfect, but their dedication to happiness in each other kept them joyous all their lives. It wasn't long before they added to their family and brought a new generation of happiness into Equestria. Berry Punch continued as a part-time minister to supplement her janitorial salary. She found her summers filled with couples flocking to Ponyville for quick marriages without the hassle of prying eyes or tutting parents. Carrot Top found herself in the role of an adopted aunt after Lyra and Bon Bon's first foal. As Ponyville's economy continued to grow, so did the demand for her carrots. Soon her farm was supplying ponies from Philadelphia to Manhattan with all the carrots that they could need. Pokey eventually left Ponyville after being drafted for a quest by the princess. He still visits occasionally for Pinky's parties and Bon Bon's confections. Duke Afario eventually gave up his quest to keep the noble lineage pure when he learned that his own family had ascended from common stock. He eventually learned an important lesson in love and tolerance when he met his distant relatives, a simple family of rock farmers from Bridalburg. Hot found another job in Ponyville after he quit the Balloons Cafe. He never followed through with his threat, and to this day he still hides every time he sees Lyra or Bon Bon for fear of reprisal. Despite her blatant lack of journalistic integrity, Snappy Scoops continued publishing stories for the Ponyville tabloids. She eventually won a Pulitzer Prize for her article about Fluttershy's chickens. Plow and Barbell bought a farm outside Philadelphia and adopted 6 foals. They now raise prize pumpkins, and despite the odd circumstances surrounding their relationship, they too lived happily ever after. And Pinky continued to be Pinky. The end.